You're dealing blackjack, you're working chicken joints because you can't make ends meet in Vegas. Did you consider giving up at that point?
Oh, absolutely.
In 1978, you come across Mel Tillis's band leader, and he hears you and says what?
He said, I want to sign you to my publishing company. I said, well, that's all fine and good. He said, but I want you to come to Nashville. I said, there's no way I'm moving to Nashville, Tennessee. You know, I'm singing James Taylor and Elton John, Billy Joel. I'm singing Earth, Wind, and Fire. I have my own thing here. He said, but you'd be great in country.
You wrote, God Bless the USA. I mean, you told me Elvis was a partial influence.
So when I saw him singing, he'd always end his show with a trilogy, and it ended up with Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I said, if I ever get a career in music, I said, I'm going to do the trilogy to close my show, and I will kill them with it. Lo and behold, I wrote my own.
It's clearly the theme song of the Trump presidency. Did he ever tell you why he chose your song? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande, where we dive into the wild currents of this culture and dredge up perspectives and practical life lessons from incredible culture makers. Coming up, a Grammy winner that has left such a mark on the culture. The legendary Lee Greenwood is here. Go subscribe, like Arroyo Grande, wherever you get your podcasts, or on our YouTube channel right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. And coming up, a surprising how it ends about gliding through difficulties and landing at your place in the world with style. You will love this. You're going to love this Lee Greenwood interview as well. Pay attention to how receptive Greenwood was to the opportunities when they presented themselves and how he adapted his art to the moment. Greenwood also tells me how he came to write the anthem, God Bless the USA, and why it and he remain vital all these years later. Here's Lee Greenwood. Lee, I want to start with your background. When we talked earlier, you talked about growing up on a chicken farm in
Sacramento.
Middle California.
Yeah.
How did that shape your musical tastes?
Well, it didn't. We were sharecroppers. We had about 1,000 chickens a year, a couple of cows. The difference between a farmer and a rancher is that the farmer has to chase the cows on foot because they don't have any horses. And it was a good life. I mean, but did shape my musical career was my mother. My father joined the Navy after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and my mother divorced him, as happens in military families. Yeah. She couldn't actually handle two kids. I have a sister, older, still living in Boise, Idaho. Has moved out of California, as I have.
Yeah.
And so she played honky-tonk piano in the nightclubs.
In the nightclubs, not at home?
Well, we had a spin-it piano, but she was never there.
Really?
She's working all the time.
Did you pick up the piano from her? I know
By
you
myself.
taught yourself a bunch of it.
By myself, yeah.
What did you teach yourself?
What?
Yeah.
Piano.
What? Piano and sax?
Well, sax came later.
Okay.
Actually, my mother was one day at the house. I remember calling. She was trying to teach me how to play, and I said, I'm not learning how to play that. And she said, but you have to. I said, no, I'm not. So I quit and went and played baseball. And I became a baseball all-star. And then 3 years later, my grandfather, who was actually not my real grandfather, his name was Thomas Jackson, married into my family when I was very young.
Okay.
And explained that he did love my father, although I didn't know my father when he was in his working years. Said he was a great welder, a ship welder. And so his brother, my grandfather's brother, played saxophone. And his teeth were all worn out because in those days the mouthpiece was harder than the ivory.
Oh, wow.
And so playing in clubs, but he didn't play anymore, and he gave me his saxophone.
Wow.
So I played it, and then we were doing not USO, but Red Cross shows. I was like 13. And remember a Woody? Remember the Woody cars?
Oh, sure, sure.
You're not on the
No, I know them. I mean, I've seen them. I wasn't in them, but I remember them.
So Willie's station wagon. So I put the saxophone up on the top and down the highway, and it blew off the top and went across the road and smashed in a million pieces.
Wow.
So the Red Cross bought me another one. So that's a sidebar.
That was fortuitous, yeah.
Yeah. So then now I have this saxophone and I play it in school. and I go on and I play in high school. I play all of the instruments of the band because my high school music teacher, who was a trumpet player, a jazz player, knew I wasn't going to college. So I played the timpani in the symphony orchestra. I played tenor saxophone in the dance band. I played alto saxophone in the marching band, and I was the drum major for the high school marching band.
That's where you gathered up all those Sousa melodies
and I sang in the choir. And then I had 2 years of music theory in my senior year. Music theory is important because now it gives me the tools to be able to arrange and write music. And when I left high school at 17 years old and went to Nevada,
you had all that.
Had all of it. I was well equipped.
Well, I got to say, as I look at your career, one of the things that jumps out, and it's something that I don't think you spend enough time sharing with people, your adaptability to the circumstances of the moment. You were able to adapt very quickly. You go out to Vegas and you're singing with band, you're leading bands. You led a group called the Del Reeves. Then you have the Lee Greenwood Affair. What happened in the interim there after that? And what kind of music? It was pop music, right? In Vegas?
Pop was everything. Pop was country, rock,
rhythm and blues,
adult contemporary, rhythm and blues, soul, Broadway. We did everything. That's what pop music was.
Okay.
And yes, you made a very interesting point. Every one of the bands and shows I played in Vegas was doing something different. I would dance in this show. I would sing in that one. When Babette de Castro of the de Castro sisters broke away from her sisters,
right,
she had a show at the Desert Inn Hotel. I'm going to lead you down the rabbit hole.
I want to go. Take me.
She hired 4 singers to do background choreography and background vocals.
And you were one of those boys.
I was one of the boys. It was 2 boys, 2 girls. One of the girls would end up being Lieutenant Governor of the state of Nevada, Lori Mancuso Black. And we're still very good friends over the years.
Amazing.
And so now that's not the interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story is she was working 40 on and 40 off. Who was the other act that would work 40 on? Now we're getting somewhere. Her name was Sandu Scott and the Scotties, and she was a beautiful singer from Scotland. Yeah. And she had a band with her. At that particular time in history, I had a reason to leave Vegas. I wanted to get out of town. I just had enough. I joined the band. We go to Puerto Rico for 30 days, and then we go to New York. And the reason we were going to New York is for the Ed Sullivan Show. Now you know the time frame.
Wow.
So I'm with the band that's going to play on the Ed Sullivan Show, and she quits the business. I'm stuck in New York, living in Hoboken, dead of winter.
Frank Sinatra's hometown.
Joey D and the Starlighters have a club downtown called the Peppermint Twist. And it was the name of the dance at the time, the Peppermint Twist. So I go downtown with the guys. My eyes are wide open. God, this is so different than Sacramento,
right,
so different from Vegas. It's New York, but it's very cold. I'm going to get pneumonia.
Okay.
And so I told the drummer, Dino Dinelli, who lived in Hoboken, I said, I've got to go back. So I take my plane ticket that I had home. It was the only thing I had back. And I go back. I'm working the El Cortez Hotel.
To Vegas.
Back to Vegas.
Okay.
Working the El Cortez Hotel when Frank Sinatra walks into the Fremont and discovers Wayne Newton. I'm 3 blocks from there. I'm working with a wrestler named the Golden Boy. It was terrible. I get another job on the Strip. Now I get the contract job, and I'm a member of the union. I've been a member of the 369 union since I was 17. Wow. So I called Dino Dinelli, great drummer. And I said, I got a gig on the Strip. How about you joining me? I can take care of your travel dues, $500 a week. He said, well, my cousin and I put together the band that you were going to be in, and the organ player is named Felix Cavalier. And he said, we put this band together, and a guy came and wanted to make our records. And I said, okay, well, good luck.
Who's that guy?
3 months later, the Good Lovin' had their first record, The Young Rascals. So I would have been a member of the Young Rascals band.
And now, missed it by that much.
And now Felix Cavalier lives in Nashville, Tennessee. Wow. And the band that used to work for me called Six Wire, that was at the RNC, plays his music on the road.
You are kidding me.
Yeah. So
talk about the full circle.
So there's a full circle moment.
Talk to me a bit about this, because I'm fascinated, and I think it's something people can take away from your amazing journey. When you could do so much and you still can. Here you are, but then you're dealing blackjack, you're working chicken joints because you can't make ends meet in Vegas. What happens then? Did you consider giving up at that point?
Oh, absolutely.
This is the late 70s, right?
Yeah, and so I'm dealing cards, I deal roulette. I was at the Tropicana for 3 years. I went down to the Mint downtown for another year and a half working the graveyard shift. And I figured if I get that close to the money, I must get some, but I didn't.
You could see it coming and going, but you couldn't touch it.
Couldn't touch it. And so I tried. I could have been a shift boss, eventually maybe a manager of a casino, maybe even have my own joint after a while. And I was considering that seriously. But after 3.5 years and opening, act for other things, main room, I had successful lounge shows. There was no doubt about it. I decided to go ahead and stay with the music, and I pursued it with a passion. But it was luck. It was luck that brought my career to me in Nashville.
In 1978, you come across Mel Tillis's band leader, and he hears you and says what? Because this is another big shift. And see, some of us could never make that shift. We just don't have that bandwidth. Lee Greenwood did.
Yes, I did.
What does he tell you?
Well, I was playing piano bar at the MGM after I left the show where I was at the Nugget. The Nugget was always very popular, and it was always lucky for me. I found $200 on the floor one time at the Nugget. So Mel Tillis is in the main room, and the bass player from Virginia, Larry McFadden, who is deceased now, said to me at the MGM, he said, I love what you do, and I have a publishing company with Ray Pillow, who is a Grand Ole Opry star in Nashville. And he said, I want to sign you to my publishing company. I said, well, that's all fine and good. He said, but I want you to come to Nashville. I said, there's no way I'm moving to Nashville, Tennessee. I'm singing James Taylor and Elton John and Billy Joel. I'm singing Earth, Wind, and Fire. I have my own thing here. He said, but you'd be great in country.
Wow. And you make the leap. How did that happen?
Not quickly.
Did you move to Nashville first, or what happened?
No, we went to Nashville and recorded some songs with Mel Tillis' band, many that I had written myself, and got BMI interested. Okay. I signed with BMI as a writer. My mother was a BMI writer, and one of my sons, Parker, is now a BMI writer. So full circle there. Yeah. And I recorded these. I go back, and they said, I think we have an interest in MCA Records. If you'll drive to Nashville and stay with me for a couple months. So I drove through Oklahoma City, and I signed with an agency called the Jim Halsey Company, which to this day manages the Oak Ridge Boys. And so we go on to Nashville.
This is 81, right? You signed with MCA in 81?
79.
Okay.
1979.
Yeah, that's right. We got it.
Don't want to, how old we are.
Don't want to get ahead of you all.
And so, so I signed at MCA, and Reba McEntire, George Strait, the Oak Ridge Boys, and Barbara Mandrell, all on the same label. And I got into the big time. I mean, it was like overnight. And we recorded our first record called It Turns Me Inside Out. The second record, Ring on Her Finger, Time on Her Hands. Both were smash hits. And then they signed me to a 7-year deal.
Wow. Who were your biggest influences once you landed in country and said, okay, I'm going to do this now?
I liked Ronnie Millsap. I love his approach to music. I loved Kenny Rogers. I would eventually write Kenny Rogers a hit song.
That's right.
As well.
Which one?
It's called A Love Song.
Oh, A Love Song.
But I love their style. I love what they brought to the business. Barbara Mandrell would end up being a very close friend of mine.
You recorded a lot with her.
I recorded an album where I wrote the title song of the album, the duet album called You Were Meant for Me. Yeah. And so it's interesting how the relationships evolved in country music, because I went there and embraced the community, and all of the artists embraced me.
Is that the key? You have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
Were you at all you had to be a bit you were a Vegas guy from the West Coast, suddenly dropped in the middle of country.
Yeah, I tried to play that down, they didn't want to hear that.
I'll bet. Did you put the Stetson on and the jeans at the beginning? What happened?
Actually, Jordache.
Oh, that's right. That was the big
boots
at the time.
They were nice and tight on the hips, and I like that. But no hat.
No hat.
And maybe as I look back now and I'm losing more hair, I probably should have started with a hat like Tim McGraw.
You and me both. Can you loan me more?
It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
But no, I was my own brand of country.
You toured with Loretta Lynn?
Yes.
Tell me what you got from her. What did you pick up from her?
Gentle soul. She was humbled by everything that she did and saw. She comes from very poor beginnings. We didn't have much growing up, but I had a pair of socks that I could wash out every night. I doubt if they had anything. And as a coal miner's daughter, as it's put, She was just wonderful to me and everybody around her. I also toured with Tammy Wynette, Charlie Pride, the Orchid Boys, the Gatlin Brothers, Kenny Rogers, Alabama. We're back touring with Alabama again now this year, 2024.
Really?
Oddly enough.
When did you start touring with them? In the 80s?
It was later than that. We were in competition in the early days.
Okay.
It would be a little bit later, in the late 80s.
Wow.
So,
and all these years later, you're touring again.
again, it's amazing. And they can still fill up an arena.
Well, so can you.
Well,
and,
thank you.
And sing. And sing, I might add.
And I pride
beautifully.
myself in that.
Really. Do you work at it every day? Do you warm up every day? Do you do your scales?
No, but I will tell you that if I don't sing for a month,
You feel it.
it's very hard. It's a struggle to get back. So I have shows all the time. I sing every week in shows.
Just to keep yourself in the game and feeling like you can.
No, it's about the money. No.
Speaking of flexibility, okay. Tell me about, you write a McDonald's jingle,
Yes.
which makes you some bank, speaking of money, and a couple of, big hits.
Yeah.
Somebody's Gonna Love You, IOU. You win a Grammy for IOU.
Yes, I did.
And then in 1983, you write the song that has really defined your career in many ways.
Yes.
How did that happen?
And I will tell you that it's an umbrella, but it's not a parachute. And I embrace the fact that it is an umbrella and it gives me some shadow from the sunlight, but it has had an interesting journey. Universal was the one that made the call for the single. I would have never chosen it. My producer, Jerry Crutchfield, and I, we had 3 hits by his brother, Jan Crutchfield.
Yeah.
And we always chose very carefully the songs that would pattern our career and how we wanted to move forward.
And you write the song this particular song on a tour bus while you're out touring.
Yes. I set up a piano. We were doing 300 days a year the first 3 years. Oh my gosh. And when I came home, I would sign autographs for fans on pictures for 12 hours.
Oh my Lord.
When I got home, get some sleep, go back on the bus, change my wardrobe. And so we were out so long, I had my piano hinged to the wall. And then I had a circular bed, and the time you could have a bed like that, we didn't have a turbo. The turbo engine now prevents you having it. You have to have a bed on one side in the stateroom. And so I would lift the piano up and put it on my knees, plug in my headphones so I would not disturb the crew, because I rode the bus with the crew. I didn't like touring with the band. They had their own band, their own bus. And that's when I wrote USA one night. And it was fall of 83. I can't pinpoint the month or day, but it was probably October.
What was the inspiration for it? Why? You told me Elvis was a partial influence.
Yes.
Tell us about that story. It's a great one.
Yeah, I worked the Hilton Hotel with a show. I had my own band called the Lee Greenwood Affair at the time. 2 girl singers who were unbelievable and a quartet. And the guitar player in that band is still my very close friend. We had 2 things in common when we met at 21 years old, basketball and music. And he's still a basketball player and musician. He lives up in Indiana near Chicago. But there was a great band, and I loved what we did. But going in and seeing Elvis perform was such a higher level than where I was. And I love, because he did exactly what I wanted to do. He just did it better. and he was a magic. One of the most handsome American young men when he became famous. His movies, and of course Colonel Parker took advantage of him and all that. But he still was adored by America. And all of the audiences saw him. They sold out every night, regardless. At the end of his career, he really wasn't very good. That didn't matter. He was still the image of Elvis Presley.
He was Elvis,
So when I saw him singing, he'd always end the show with a trilogy. And it ended up with Battle Hymn of the Republic. He was very reverent. And I liked that. He could have been a preacher. He was not from Memphis, Tennessee. He was from Mississippi.
That's right.
But he was raised in Memphis. And Graceland, therefore, was built in Memphis. But I said, if I ever get my country music career, and at that point, I hadn't had it yet.
Oh.
And I said, if I ever get a career in music, and I assume it would be country. I tried rock, I tried pop. It wasn't going to. Vegas was a dead end street. I wasn't going to go anywhere. I had to go somewhere else. I said, I'm going to do the trilogy to close my show, and I will kill them with it. And so, lo and behold, I wrote my own.
You wrote God Bless the USA. When you first performed it, what was that like? Because the audience always tells you.
Correct. You're very astute. No matter what artist you have, if you're popular with the public, your next song that you release is going to be popular. I don't care.
Right.
They're going to applaud. It's a new song. Oh my gosh, we love that.
Right.
You know, I learned all the lyrics. I sing along with you. You were careful. We're tunesmiths. We know what we're selling.
Yeah.
USA was not supposed to be a record. When Universal made the call, said, we're not going to release You Got a Good Love Coming, the title of your album. We're going to release God Bless USA. They never would have heard the song on radio had Universal not did that.
Really? What's the story of you taking the tape to the MCA executive on Halloween?
Yeah.
What is that story, Lee?
I write the song and I have it on a cassette. And you're right, it was cassette tape. That's
This
all
is
we
God
had.
Bless the USA. You've written and what is it, a demo?
Yeah. It's my playing piano.
You're playing it.
It's
Okay.
playing piano and singing. And I had my Walkman with me, and I fly from Nashville to Los Angeles.
Why?
I'm doing a show called Solid Gold.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Solid
show.
Gold was hosted by a friend of mine from the Fifth Dimension named Marilyn McCoo.
Marilyn McCoo, yeah.
Marilyn
Solid Gold, banana. I remember it.
She was a very good friend of mine.
Yeah, she was
so
great.
they booked me on the show. After the show, I do a couple of my hits. I figured Marilyn comes out and hands me a bottle of champagne. Said, thanks for coming. We get a hug. Come back when you get another hit. I'll have you back on the show. Great. It's 8 o'clock. I got the red eye out at 1:20 in the morning to Nashville. That's when they had a red eye.
Wow.
And it usually wasn't full.
You were the only guy
you
with
could
your
sleep.
champagne.
And so I'm saying, what am I going to do for 4 hours? I really wasn't hungry. And I asked the limo driver, I have a stretch limo. That's what MCA provided me. I said, where does Irving Azoff live? And he said, I know exactly where he lives. I took him to his house last month. He said, he lives in Hollywood next to Barbara Streisand. I said, take me there. It is Halloween night. It's dark. I pull up in front of his house. There is no gates. There's no fence. Between the street and his front door, I would say is 20 yards, less, 15 yards. He is standing in the doorway with his 3 children dressed as bumblebees, and they're going trick-or-treating.
And Lee Greenwood steps out of the limo with his demo.
And a bottle of champagne.
And what do you say to him?
Trick or treat.
Of course, trick or treat.
He waits in the doorway because he sees the limo. Must be somebody he knows.
Who's this?
And I walk up to him and I say, trick or treat. And he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Lee Greenwood. I'm on your Nashville label. Oh, I know who you are. Come on in.
Wow.
He's a little short guy, about 5'5". I'm 5'7", so that makes him short.
You towered over him.
Yeah. So we go in the house, and he said, what are you doing in L.A.? I told him I was a Solid Gold. And I said, but I wanted to stop by your house because I have a song I'd like you to hear. Takes a cassette, puts it in the cassette player, and listens to the 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Interesting. He said, do you have a project? And I didn't want to tell him I did. Because Jerry Crutchfield, my producer, and I were always quiet about that. We don't want L.A. to tell us what to do. Neither did Barbara Menjo or neither did George Strait.
That's why you had hits.
Well, we were our own profit center.
Right.
And so I said, yeah, we're in that process. He said, well, when you finish the album, bring it to me. But that opened the door. So when I went home and talked to my producer, Jerry Crutchfield, I said, we were having some trouble getting ahead of George Strait because his manager was the A&R director at MCA. Oh, yeah. He always released his records in front of mine. I was like, dang, we still had hits, but we wanted to get ahead of this. So Jerry said, for the first time, let's take this to LA. Well, that, again, thank you, Lord. So we go there. They listened to the entire album, and Irving Azoff is the one that turned to me and said, what should be the single? So he asked me.
So you chose it?
No. I looked at my producer and I went, nope. I said, what do you think? He's the one who made the choice. He was the president of Universal Records, Pictures, MCA, Dot Records, there was a whole bunch of umbrella. So he's a very powerful industry person. So he's the one that made the choice.
And that was it.
That was it. So now you ask me the question, what did I feel like when I first sang it for the first time?
Yes, in front of an audience. What was that reaction like? And was that the affirmation you were looking for?
I want to say it was, well, I didn't expect anything different than any of the other hits I'd already sang.
Right.
I expected the same response.
Yeah, but polite, enthusiastic.
More than
we
enthusiastic. I was very popular at the time. I'd won male vocalist already 3 times.
Yeah, you were hot.
So, the performance, I think, was it for the, in Florida Stadium. And the audience went crazy. And at that moment, I knew I could not close my show with it.
Incredible. And then President Reagan and the RNC uses it in a film in 1980. '84 when he's running for re-election.
They asked me, and I gave them permission to do that.
Wow. And then how many other presidents end up using it?
Only 4 conservative, but I've sang for 10 presidents.
Wow.
At the Reagan Library, it was Nixon, Carter, Ford, Bush, and Reagan, and all their wives, and Lady Bird Johnson. And I had to keep moving back and forth so the media could cover all of them. Then Hurricane Relief at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga and Alabama was on that show. I emceed the event. I sang with the cadets. And in the audience was Presidents Obama, Clinton, Carter, Bush, and Bush.
Oh, my Lord. You've hit them all. Why does it still resonate today, Lee? Why does that song still have a hold on people?
I wrote it that way. I wanted to make sure it was for all time.
And that it would touch deep the patriotic hearts.
Proud to be an American.
Why are you proud to be an American?
Well, not just because I was born here, but there's a chance for everybody like me who can start with nothing, lose everything, go back again, and have it again.
You know, Lee's story brings to mind a figure skater who did a double axel out of defeat into couture. And wait until you hear how it ends. Little Vera had one dream: to skate in the Olympics. She labored for years on the ice. But when she failed to qualify for the 1968 U.S. Olympic team, she pivoted into something unlikely: covering fashion. Within a few years, at 23, Vera landed a spot at Vogue magazine as the youngest editor in the periodical's history. And nearly 2 decades later, when the editor-in-chief position opened up, became available, Vera was not selected. She told Women's Wear Daily, "My career has been every bit as much about adversity as it has about passion, coupled with the necessary willingness to accept change." And accept change, Vera did. So she went to work for Ralph Lauren, creating accessories, and during that time, she was engaged to be married and started searching for an appropriate dress to wear for the occasion. She didn't like what she saw. She wanted something more modern and stylish. So Vera began toying with designing wedding dresses. By 1990, she opened her own boutique bridal salon at the Carlisle Hotel in New York. She would go on to design wedding dresses for Kim Kardashian, J-Lo, Mariah Carey, Victoria Beckham, and many, many others. Vera Wang transformed not only bridal gowns, but created a fashion empire. Oh, and in 1992 and 1994, she finally made it to the Olympic ice, designing costumes worn by U.S. skater Nancy Kerrigan. When you pay attention to the turns of fate, even failure, and accept change, you can glide to a huge success. Just ask Vera Wang. And that's how it ends. Back to Lee Greenwood. You said at a point you were going to stop touring, and this is recently, 2024. That's the end of it. What happened?
I did an interview with a young columnist. He's very young and very popular.
Uh-huh.
And I was getting ready to go do my show, and we're sitting in a casual setting like this.
Okay.
And he something about retirement, and I went, yeah, probably next year, and it blew up.
Right.
I mean, everybody suddenly jumped on that. Oh, you're quitting.
Lee Greenwood's ending
I didn't really confirm that, by any special announcement. That's where that came from. Now, have I thought about it? Every year I think about it. Consider when somebody gets in their 80s, you don't know what's coming next year. Every year I'm going to revisit this until I figure it's truthful.
But you have a band. I mean, we were talking about, you have a band that travels with you. What did they think when they saw that announcement?
like, does that mean we got to go to the unemployment line? I said, well, not just yet. But they're very loyal, and we have a great touring show.
Well, you traveled. I love that you traveled with Bob Hope. Bob Hope said at one point he went out to the troops to remind them of the normalcy that they didn't have at the moment in war and what they were fighting for.
That's why after 14 USO tours, and touring with Bob Hope. And that was interesting because we went around the world. We had 2 C-141s. Vic Damone got sick, and they put out the call for a singer, and I joined them in Los Angeles. We picked up the Hawaii Orchestra and went on to the Philippines.
Wow.
And we did 8 stops, 8 days, 25,000 miles around the world. And the caveat is that our last stop would have been the Azore Islands. And traditionally, the wind at the Azore Islands blows very hard across the runway. When we came in with our 2 airplanes, they said, you can't land. And so we turned back. We weren't going to end our tour not doing a show. There's a huge air base on the coast of Spain called Rota, R-O-T-A. Been there or know where it is? You know where it is? I know of it, yeah. So we put on our show unannounced for the military there. So they got a kind of a cool show.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It was Barbara Eden, Connie Stevens, Miss America, myself, Bob Hope, one other person, a comedian.
Wow.
And so I was kind of like the straight man for Bob Hope on the time. So we're flying over the Azore Islands. We're in the cockpit and we're talking to them and saying, we're so sorry that we missed you. Unbeknownst to us, there was a quartet on the ground, 2 girls and 2 boys, who had been touring Europe with Randy Travis. And their last show was the Azore Islands, and we were the ride home as the opening act for us at Christmas. It is Christmas Eve when we left. One of those girls is now my wife.
Oh my gosh. Now that's a story. Is that how you met on the trip back?
We wouldn't meet for another year and a half on a USO tour that I invited her.
Wow. And tell me, she was the conduit for you meeting Trump the first time too,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, she was Miss Tennessee USA. And then when we first got married, was in 1992, she decided to become an executive director of the pageants. And I said, you can do whatever you want. You're a double major, communications and English out of college. If you want to do this for a business, fine, I support you. So we directed Tennessee first, and then Georgia, now Mississippi. So she had 3 states. And so for 21 years, of course, Donald Trump owned Miss Universe.
Right.
So there were plenty of times when we did the national contest or the Miss Universe, which would be out of the country.
Right.
And we would run into each other, not necessarily, hello, Donald Trump. It was just, we're in the same room together. He would see me, he would talk to her, say hello to Lee, whatever, But, so that's...
Did he ever tell you why he chose your song? And I don't care what he says. It's clearly the theme song of the Trump presidency. Every time the man appears at a rally, a talk show, did he ever tell you why he chose
and I think the next time I see him, I'll ask him that. But he never said that.
Really?
A lot of people, by the way, for his inauguration in 2016, people were scared away. A lot of entertainers, no, I'm not going to be there. They couldn't scare me away. I said, I'm loyal to the people that I believe in. And so I sang there for him. But I never asked him why you're singing it. He never asked me or my team for permission to sing it. And we never said yes or no. We just said, let it happen, because I'm proud to have this happen. And so we just, it's kind of like a handshake.
Tell me what it was like when you sang at the Republican convention after the assassination attempt. That was his first time out. I was there. I remember that moment, and I could see you. I was close enough to watch you singing it. It was very different, that performance.
It was. It's the first time I would have seen him since the shooting.
Since Butler.
And interesting enough, the band behind me, which is called Six Wire, worked for me for 10 years. They were on my show, my USO tour, when I met my wife, Kim. So I knew them for 34 years. That's an important factor, because when they told me that morning, you're going to introduce the president tonight, this decision hadn't been made yet. Wow. I knew I was in there in Milwaukee early, but it wasn't the official, you're going to do this. Had I not had the band playing my music, my track only runs 3 minutes and 20-something seconds. The music would have been done before he even got to the box.
Right, because he did that long walk.
That's a timing thing. So after seeing him walk in, and then I noticed he had the vice president with him too. Walk up to finally get into the box. The music is, I've already sang the first verse for his entrance, and the band is just vamping. We call it vamping, when you continue to play music, but there's no verse. And I waited until he got in the box. He got settled, and I got eye contact with Don Jr., and then that's the moment. And so I just spoke from my heart. It's like, I've never been shot. Well, I was shot at in Panama, but I mean, not tried to kill because of who I am, just what I represented. I was in the military, with the military in Panama, and I got shot at. But he had got shot because of who he was. And I was concerned for him as a person, not just an American, not just as the president. But, you know, somebody wanted to kill him for no reason at all. And I'm like, what? This isn't right. You know, so I spoke from my heart, and I let America know that millions were watching, billions maybe, you know, but I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about right here and right now. And it was the right thing to do. And then I sang the rest of it, and he proudly stood there and listened to it all.
Tell me, before I wrap this up, and I have a questionnaire I ask everybody I interview. One of the things I saw as I read your story, as I read deeply into your story, and I've watched you for so many years, your nimbleness, your ability to adapt to the situation and the moment. What advice would you give young people, anybody watching, about being receptive to what's happening in front of you and meeting the moment? Because it seems to me that's what you've done throughout this career.
You know, it is what I've done my whole career. I've adapted to the situation. I played dance halls, you know, where a fight broke out in the front row. I've played at Carnegie Hall. There's different and changing circumstances. And a lot of it for me has to do with sound. Sound is my world. So if I don't have the proper sound, I'm affected by that. I get perfect sound. I have control of my environment, and then I have control of my personality. I get emotional, as you see. I get talking about stuff. I get emotional.
Good.
So
this is why your music is so lively. I mean, this is why you move millions of people when they hear your song, because it's connected. I mean, I know that from watching you for years.
I think I could sum up what you asked me in one word.
Okay.
Survival. I think it's survival, because I always, no matter what job I was, and I have a variety of jobs, not just dealing cards in Vegas, not just music. I worked as a farmer. I was a ranch hand. You know, I sold hams. I sold Dixie chicken. No matter what it is, I wanted to make sure that whoever I worked for wanted me to stay. So I always worked hard at whatever job it was. I learned it well, and I learned it well enough they wouldn't want to let me go. And so when I found a better opportunity, it was not that I burned a bridge. It's not that I left that in the dust. They would constantly remember I was a good employee.
Tell me, 22 albums, 35 singles that hit the Billboard charts.
Yeah.
Looking at all of that, the history, the American history you've been a part of because of your music. What do you think is Lee Greenwood's purpose, if you had to define it now?
I have to look at that in a couple of ways.
Okay.
As a Christian, I think my purpose is to please God. And I hope I pleased him with the later part of my life.
I like that qualifier, Lee. That's good. Hold on, I got to write that down.
As a younger person, I'm not so proud of how I was a wild hare. And I guess a lot of young people are. That's the first thing. The second thing is that to represent what America stands for, because this land is very special. I mean, North America, you know, I love Canada as well. I even love the people in Mexico. I lived in California long enough that I remember my daughter, Laura, is married to a Gutierrez, and they live in the high desert. Her husband's a brick mason. And my son, Ted, who lives in Chicago, he's a dancer, singer, and his mother was Castilian Spanish. So I have reason to believe that all of North America is very special. I've been in Europe many times. We've been in South America. We've been, you know, in the Caribbean and everywhere in Europe that I've been, different countries for different reasons. I want to be an ambassador for my country. I want to be a great example of what Americans are. And I think that's important. We all need to do that.
Well, you are that. You are that. I mean, and your music touches generations. My children, you know, I remember we saw you one time and it was my parents. I'm standing, now I'm going to cry. My parents, myself, our children, everybody knew your music. Everybody was singing along. And my father, who's a Marine, you know, was drenched in tears. Those moments you've given us are very special. And I hope you know that.
Well, thank you. I will leave you this. Somebody asked me in an interview one time, and I get a lot of interesting questions, and your interview has been great. Yes. Do you have any regrets for writing God Bless USA? I said, only one. And they curiously said, what is that? I said, I didn't write White Christmas.
Oh, that's everybody's great regret. That's my great regret too. And but the story of that is like yours. It came from something very personal.
It did.
He was writing about the loss of his child, which I didn't know about. Irving Berlin lost his child.
Right.
And every Christmas, he was Jewish. He didn't celebrate Christmas. Every Christmas, they would go visit the grave of that son.
Yep.
So if you listen to the song, that melancholic line, and you as a songwriter of anybody will know that.
Yep.
There's that melancholic line where it kind of turns at the end. If only in our dreams.
Yep.
Oh, it always hits me. I almost can't listen to it anymore. It makes me so sad. Tell me, before I get to my Arroyo Grande questionnaire, which are quick questions, I love that this is sitting between us. Your God Bless the USA Bible, which is proudly called the Holy Bible and then qualified with the God Bless the USA. Why is the Word of God so important to you? How has it shaped your life?
My wife, Kim, brought me back to the faith that I knew I had to have. Being raised in a church is not necessarily embedded faith. Mm-hmm. And I don't like people to indoctrinate a child about faith if they don't need it. Mm-hmm. In our church, we do baptism still. And it's wonderful to see a young child who's made the decision. I think it has to be after 12. I mean, 10, 11, 12, 13, before the age of reason. And they start saying, what is this about? What is religion about? What is Christ? Who is Christ? Mm-hmm. And understand the story of Jesus Christ and how he is the Savior, but not just the Savior, the light of the world at the time, because it was a very dark world before Jesus Christ came. And so faith to me is important enough that I decided to not only produce this Bible, but tell people the reason I did it was because it's different than any other. It has in the rear of the Bible the documents that founded our country. And that's the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. Now there's also the Pledge of Allegiance and my handwritten version of God Bless the USA chorus.
Oh, nice.
Proud to be an American. That's just a sidebar. But it's beautiful to hold, and its acceptance has been overwhelming. Not just because the president has his own version. Yeah. Actually, his Bible is the same color and everything. It actually says his name on it.
Oh, it's the Trump Bible.
Yeah, it's a Trump Bible. This is the God.
But he did no rewrites, I hope.
No.
Okay, no rewrites.
No
just
rewrites
branded.
of the Holy Word. No, we don't go there.
Okay, I got to give you the Arroyo Grande questionnaire, which I ask everybody I talk to.
Okay.
First of all, who is the person you most admire?
Maybe Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Why Eisenhower?
You remember he was a 5-star.
Yeah.
He was a man that had to make decisions that no one else would want to make.
Yeah. In a snap.
After the first wave in Normandy, he asked his chief of staff, what are the losses? And he said 90%. He said, send the second wave. That takes courage. It takes foresight to know that he would end the war by stopping the Germans in France. If he didn't do that, many more would have died later on.
Yeah.
And then he became president of the United States. A man of great value. He knew faith.
Yeah.
And if he didn't know faith, he wouldn't be able to send those men to their death.
No, even Roosevelt called it the Great Crusade. He called that particular invasion the Great Crusade. Interesting. Who is the person you most despise? This is a tough one.
Ooh.
That's harder than the first, Lee.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Don't look at that camera, Lee. Look at me. Keep your eyes here.
I'm on. I don't think I can say that.
Okay.
You know, the very few people that there's a psalm in the Bible. It's Psalm 32. It's about forgiveness. And I've had some people do me wrong, and I forgive them. And I don't want to mention their names.
That's a great answer. No one's ever given me that answer, and it's my favorite answer to that. Okay. What is your best feature?
I think my distinctive voice. We all have distinctive voices, the voice print. And I was telling my tech that I was in a store the other day and just talking to the clerk, and somebody reminded me, you're Lee Greenwood, aren't you? And so my voice, you know, I think that's my distinctive feature.
What's your worst feature?
I'm too short.
That can be cured.
I would give
voice you can't replace.
I would give anything to be 5'10". I could have been a basketball player.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You're just perfect the way you are. Your favorite meal?
Oh, fried chicken.
Fried chicken. Even after cooking it, you still have a
fried chicken
for it.
And my wife's lasagna.
Wow.
She makes great lasagna and pumpkin pie.
What do you fear?
Losing my voice.
Have you ever lost it?
Yes, I have. Working too hard. for 4 or 5 years, doubling gigs in Vegas, and actually lost my voice. And I had to stop for about 3 months and finally came back.
People don't realize how tender it is. I sing a little bit on the side, Lee, and I that's why I worship what you do, and I don't know how you do it. Because people don't realize you use it every moment, and it reflects every part of how you're feeling that day, your emotional state. It's all there.
I can normally be 90%. A few times I'm 100%, but mostly 90%. In the early days of my recording career, I was probably 100% most of the time.
Wow. The greatest virtue is what, in your estimation?
Honesty.
Honesty. Why?
Because you can't ever live a lie.
The word you could not live without, Lee Greenwood?
God.
It's a good answer, too. If you could live anywhere but Nashville, where would it be and why?
I think the west coast of Florida.
Pretty.
Because it's far enough below Tampa, where we have a place in Anna Marie Island.
Oh, you're out there already.
Yeah, and it's the beautiful beaches. There could be anywhere in the world. There's nothing more beautiful than the West Coast.
Beautiful beaches.
And it's
the
moratorium.
hurricanes in the Gulf, Lee.
Yeah, we had a couple recently, and we were fine.
Okay.
But it just, I need the sunshine on my face. As I get older, I'm very white. I'm a real Caucasian. I'm Irish, English, Scottish. And
so you like your sunlight.
I got to have a little bit of a tan.
What is your biggest regret, Lee?
Not writing God Bless USA sooner during Vietnam.
Wow.
That's when they needed it.
The best piece of advice you ever received was what?
Finish big.
Who gave it to you?
My mother.
Wow.
She said, I don't care what you do in the beginning or in the middle, finish big.
Wow. Great advice.
Yeah.
And you're still doing it.
Finale.
The finale. If you could not do what you're doing, if you couldn't sing, what else would you like to have done? Or think you would have been really good at?
I would like to have been a soldier. I think I would have been good in the military. I was 3A in the draft. So the draft goes back to Vietnam years, and I'm not old. But otherwise, maybe a builder. I mean, my stepfather, Louis D'Antonoli, taught me a lot about building. My mother married him when I was 14, and he was a wonderful man. I knew him till his death. And we built motels around Disneyland. That's when I was living in California at the time. And I learned carpentry, and there's a certain thing when you finish something, you get it done, and it's something there, it's a structure. A man has built something like
the satisfaction of that.
Yeah, the satisfaction.
When this is over, what happens?
When what is over?
Life is over.
Oh, life is over.
Not this interview. I know what happens after this interview. You can go have a drink and eat and be done with these bothersome questions. I know what happens after that.
No.
But what happens when this life is over?
Well, hopefully, I will see Jesus Christ. That's a dream of every Christian. Atheists might not say that, but I do believe there's life that I can face later. I'll have to face my sins, and standing before God and opens the book and said, "This is what you did right and what you did wrong." I hope that I've lived a life that's fair and equitable for the people that have treated me so well.
Lee Greenwood, what an honor. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
A joy being with you.
Thank you very much.
He is something else. Here's the whole. When events start to move, you roll with them. You change if necessary. You make adjustments. Lee Greenwood went from a pop singer to a country artist, and he created a patriotic anthem that has really been transcendent over the last decade or so. But had he been unwilling to change course and to act on the suggestion of others, imagine what would have been lost. President Trump would have had to hum every time he walked on stage. That would have been terrible. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, narrow, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thanks for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and is available on YouTube or on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.